John and Janai Perro are the leaders of the Central Valley Tea Party there. Several months ago, John called me and said, Steve, I've got a great speaker. This guy's fantastic, and I think he'd make a great action night speaker. And it took a couple of months to land him and get it all lined up. But John, I want you to come up. You're going to be better at this than I do. Why don't you introduce our guest speaker tonight? So let's give John a hand, the head of our Oakers chapter.
I got my rain hat on. I get ready to leave the house. It's pouring down rain, so I'm not quite dressed for. I'm dressed for rain. Okay. So I would like to introduce Neil Mammen. Neil, I met Neil, gosh, probably about 2 years or so ago. My wife and I we lead the Tea Party in Oakhurst, Corscold area, but we also run what we call a Salt and Light ministry in a church. Now, for those of you that are faith-based, salt and light, as a passage in the Scripture says, let your light so shine among men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. And it's basically about putting boots on your faith, okay? So, what we're trying to do is get the passion of the Tea Party into the church. And it's not well received a lot of times, okay? Because there's a lot of people in the church that say, you know, we should be involved in politics. And I think Neil's going to kind of show you a little bit tonight why that's not necessarily so. And Neil wrote a book called Jesus is Involved in Politics, Why Aren't You and Why Isn't Your Church? So he kind of puts it on the line. But Neil is his story is, and I'll let him tell most of it, but he's a first-generation citizen. So he came to college over here, got his degree, a master's in engineering. He works in the Silicon Valley in the high-tech industry. He's got numerous patents that he's responsible for. So he is an engineer by day, and he is what is called an apologist by night. That doesn't mean somebody that goes around apologizing. That means someone that uses reason and logic to defend what they believe and why they believe it. And you can apply that in a secular realm as well as in a faith-based realm. And it just uses logic and ways of dealing with, and he'll probably give you a few examples tonight. So we ran a class, we did a WebEx series class, or a 6-week class, and I've been trying to get him here, and this is Neil's third speech today. He gave a presentation at Yosemite Lakes Church this morning for National Day of Prayer. He gave a talk at the Tea Party up in, Atwater. And he's also spoke to tea parties in San Jose. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Neil and let him go for it.
Thank you. So, here we go. Can you guys hear me? How's the mic? Good? Okay. I like roaming around, so we'll see if I don't hit the speaker zone. So I did write a book called Jesus is Involved in Politics. Whoops. Okay, there we go. That book kind of scared a lot of people, so I wrote a kind of a gentle version. It's called 40 Days Towards a More Godly Nation. And this one is actually very effective in using for what I am going to propose to you in this talk today. I also have a mailing list, which just kind of tells you that I'm in town. You're not going to get a fundraising letter, because we're a nonprofit that does not accept donations. But if you want to know if I'm in town or if I have a new book coming out, some people have asked me, oh, are you going to have an audio version of your book and things like that. So right here it's high-tech. If you look at it and it doesn't look like this, and you see something like this, just double tap on it a few times and it should give you the screen to sign up. And again, there we go. So if you can just use that and pass it around. Okay. So, my talk is based on a lot of my experiences. And so I want to give you my background to put everything in perspective. I was born in Ghana. Some of you guys think that's a town in Texas. It's not. It's actually a country right off the west coast of Africa. And some of you have heard my jokes before, so laugh anyway, all right? Because you heard me this morning. Thank you. I see that. And bless you. And I was born in Ghana, and my parents are actually Indian. My parents are from India. and they are actually Christians. So St. Thomas came to India in 71 AD, doubting Thomas, and he converted a number of locals to Christianity, and we date our heritage back to that. And the church is called the Marthoma Church, or the St. Thomas Church. So it's kind of fun, because when I met my, you'll see a picture of my wife later on, when I met my father-in-law for the first time, he said, "So how long have your family been Christians?" And I said, "A lot longer than yours." So I was being cheeky. But anyway, I was born in Ghana, but then I grew up in Jamaica, Ethiopia, India, Yemen, and Sudan. And yes, I know you're saying, Sudan, wait, that's a town in Texas. Yes, it is. Right off Highway 84, there it is. And, and now I have a new joke. See, driving to Atwater, I noticed there's a town called Delhi. How do you pronounce it? Delhi? That high, right? But it's spelled Delhi, right? I'm like, hey, I'm from Delhi, California. Hey, wait, what do you know? Wait. But anyway, that's not the Sudan I grew up in. The Sudan I grew up in is the Sudan right off the below Egypt, right in East Africa. And we lived, my dad was a professor there, and we lived about, the White Nile and the Blue Nile merged in Sudan. And so we in Khartoum, where my dad worked, and we kind of lived about 4 blocks from the Nile. So I can honestly say that I grew up in denial. So probably wondering what my dad was doing there. I mean, come on, if you think about it, he worked in all these terrorist countries, Sudan, Yemen. Yemen has a lot of trouble today. But he wasn't a terrorist. He was actually a professor in physics, and he was traveling around the world teaching at different universities. They invited him to speak, and they invited him to be a professor there. So many years ago, my dad was in Yemen. He was a professor of physics in the University of Sana'a in Yemen. And as you know, Yemen right now is in the news. It's amazing, because about 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when I first came to the States, nobody knew where Sudan was, nobody knew what Yemen was. Now everybody's like, oh yeah, Yemen, I saw it in the papers the other day. But anyway, my dad had been working in Yemen, and in Yemen women wear burqas, right? So you see this, right? And I was 18 years old, and I wanted to come to America. I knew that America was the land of my destiny, because you see, and it was the land of my dreams, and I knew that somewhere in the world there had to be more to women than this. I was a good 18-year-old boy, and I said, what country has the most beautiful women? And I would see these movies, and man, the women in America were so gorgeous. I said, I've got to go to America. And I was right, because I got here, and I found the most beautiful woman in the world, and I convinced her to marry me. And there she is. And no, those are not our kids. Those are our bridesmaids. But one of our daughters is here. Mary Catherine, can you stand up in the back? My lovely assistant. I have to tell you a little bit of this young girl. She is destined for greatness. A few weeks ago, I was driving down the road and taking her to school, and I said, yeah, we knew it was coming. And it was Hillary Clinton's announcement that she was running for president. And she started saying, oh no. I'm like, what, honey? She goes, I want to be the first woman president. And I said, we will pray that that is true. Amen? But we were in Yemen, and the professor's pay at that time was not sufficient to pay for college tuition for a foreign student in America. And so we talked about it for a while, and my dad figured out that, as long as he was working there, he could dig into his savings, and the savings would go down, but he'd be able to afford to send me for at least a few years, and we'd see what happened. But we saw no reason why that would not happen as long as he continued working. So we applied, I got admission, and I got my ticket to come to the States. And about 2 months before I was supposed to leave, my dad walked in from work, and he sat us all down, and he said that he'd been fired. His contract had been terminated. And we found out later that a fellow professor of his had committed suicide. And when they went into that room, the professor's house, they found a Bible with my dad's name on it. Because my dad was a well-known professor, they didn't throw him in prison or kill him, but they said, we got to terminate. In fact, he has students who are now politicians, and they said, we can save your life, we can't save your job. But in effect, my dad was telling me that because a fellow worker had a Bible from him, my dreams were shattered, and we had to leave that country. Because why? Because it is illegal to give someone who is not a Christian a Bible in Yemen. You see, in Islamic countries, you have Sharia law. And under Sharia law, you don't have unalienable rights. The God of Islam does not grant you inalienable rights. You certainly don't have the right to talk to others about politics, and you certainly don't have the right to talk to others about religion, and you certainly don't have the right to give a Muslim a Bible. But where do those rights come from? In Yemen, the government thinks that they grant you the rights. The right to talk to others about your religion or your views is not one the government grants you. And I go, well, Neil, that's very sad that you had that happen to you, but that would never happen in America, would it? This is a 70-year-old African-American great-grandmother arrested for ethnic intimidation. She and 10 other Christians were thrown into jail for having the audacity to stand on the side of a sidewalk during a gay parade. Now, it doesn't matter what your feelings are about it. Right? It doesn't matter whether you agree or disagree with her position. She should have the right to say that. But no, they were thrown into jail, and they faced a fine of $90,000 each in prison for 47 years.
Good God.
A pastor in Phoenix, Arizona was sentenced to jail for 10 days and 3 years of probation because a judge forbade their church bells to toll, except for 2 minutes on Sundays. It's important to notice that those church bells were lower in volume than an ice cream truck, which is allowed to chime anytime during the day in Phoenix, Arizona. Neighboring town of Gilbert, Arizona, not to be outdone, decided to outlaw Bible studies in the home. If you go to the site religiousHostility.org, you will find over 600 listings of hostility against Christians, Jews, and pastors and rabbis of faith in the United States. Now, should we be scared about this? Do our rights come from government? This is the interactive portion of the talk. Do our rights come from government? No, they don't. What would happen if our rights did come from government, though?
They could take it away.
They could take them away. Exactly. Our rights don't come from government, and if the government gave us the rights, then they could legally, ethically, morally, and justly take away those same rights, and you wouldn't be able to object. It's wrong. No, we decide what's wrong, and you're not going to have rights. Hitler decided that Jews had no rights, right? So, rights can't come from government. Well, can I give myself rights? Can I grant myself? Can I go up and say, hey, I'm emperor, you have to bow down towards me? Why can't I do that? Because I have no authority over you. I can't say that. Okay, so I can't get rights for myself. How about the masses, though? You know, a lot of the liberals think, oh yeah, the masses. We vote on rights, and then we decide to give people rights. This, by the way, is called a democracy, also known as a mobocracy. Right? The founding fathers said a mobocracy. They said no democracy ever lasted long. It killed itself. It committed suicide. And shortly thereafter, they saw the French Revolution was a full democracy and destroyed itself within a few years. So the masses, what about the masses? Can the masses give you rights? Well, here's the deal. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, look, the masses can't give you rights. He said, sure they can. Why not? That's the only place you can get it from. I said, no, well, look at Hitler, right? Hitler, the German masses decided that Jews didn't have any rights. He said, no, that's just one isolated incident. You have to take the whole world. I said, that doesn't help you. Because before the 1800s, the whole world thought slavery was okay as long as they were not the slaves. Right? It didn't matter. You could go to Africa and find slaves amongst the tribes. American Indians had slaves, right? Everybody had slaves as long as they were not the slaves, they didn't mind. Did that make slavery right? No, slavery was wrong. Slavery didn't suddenly become wrong in the 1870s. It was always wrong. The slaves, the American slaves, always had rights. Right? But those rights were constantly being violated, and it wasn't until the majority in the state recognized those pre-existing rights that what? Justice was restored. So you can't get rights from the masses. Okay? Where do the rights come from? Well, the rights can only come from someone who has the authority to say you have to treat her equally. And somebody has the authority to tell you that you have to treat him equally. See, rights can only come from someone who has an authority over those who were being treated as the slaves and those who were masters and those who were free. The rights that can only come by somebody who has authority over everybody. And who is the only person that has authority over everybody? Let's see what the Declaration of Independence says. Very logically, it says, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. They are endowed by their government with what? No. They're endowed by the masses. They're endowed by themselves. They're endowed by what? The Creator with certain unalienable rights, that amongst these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. In the book, I actually go through why rights can't come by accident, they can't come by DNA, they can't come by evolution. We go through a whole series of possible reasons explaining why rights can only come from the source of life, and that is the Creator. Now, we look at this and we go, man, that Jefferson was a very clever man. He was a genius. Yeah, he was. But he didn't come up with this idea. And it didn't come from the Enlightenment. You know where this idea was generated, was born? This idea was generated from 200 years of sermons by pastors in churches all over the world, especially in Europe and America. That rights can only come from God, from the Creator. And we see this idea repeated over and over and over again, even in as far back as the Magna Carta in 1215, drafted by Archbishop Stephen Langton, who said rights don't come from the king. What always bothers me was called the Magna Carta, because it reminds me of Jimmy Carter. And I don't like Jimmy Carter. So rights come from the Creator, right? Now, that means this is a problem though, because if a Creator gives you rights, right? Now, let me stop here for just a second. Which Creator? The Islamic Creator does not give you rights. The Islamic Creator says what? Some people are more important than others, right? Muslims are greater than non-Muslims. It's only the Judeo-Christian Creator that says all men are created equal, right? It's not the Hindu. It's not the Buddhist, right? It really is only the Judeo-Christian principles that say all men are created equal. So here's the problem. If I take away the Creator, what happens? I have no unalienable rights. And I tell my atheist friends, you have a real problem here. Because if you remove the Creator from the Declaration of Independence, you remove the Creator from the Constitution has no foundation for rights. Rights are then assigned by the government, and you are in this dangerous position of letting the government decide who is a person who deserves rights. You can't separate the two without resulting in oppression and tyranny. It's a Creator that is the assurance that oppression does not thrive. Only a mean-spirited person would strive to remove the Creator from our Constitution, the Creator from our laws, the Creator from our entire nation's history. Okay, so rights don't come from the government. So then why do I need a government? What is the purpose of government? Is there any value to having government? No, but the problem is we have to have a government. And let me tell you what the government is there for. And it says that in the rest of the Declaration. What does it say? What? It says what? That to what? Secure those rights, governments are instituted amongst men. They don't give you the rights. They're there to protect your rights. And they're only supposed to protect your rights and nothing else.
That's right.
The problem is they think they're supposed to do everything now. They think they should be mama and papa and everything, right?
Nanny state.
And if the government fails to protect your rights, what are we supposed to do? Change the government. Hopefully through peaceful means. Now let's play a game though. I said, we talked about what are rights, and there's the rights. There's your rights on your left. Well, okay, never mind. And, something else on the other side. We're going to play a game. People say what are rights? Well, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to move around the country. I think that's a Southwest Airlines commercial. But these are what rights are. Okay, these are examples of what rights are. But what is a right? How do I tell someone what a right is? Like, for instance, is healthcare a right?
No.
No, but you say no, but I can talk to 50 liberals, especially where I live in San Jose. I'm surrounded by them, right? And I say, is healthcare a right? They say, yes! I say, what about education? Is education a right?
They say
They say yes. We say no. They go, how can you be so mean-spirited? How can you be so unloving, uncaring? So we're going to play a little game. But how do you explain to them what a right is and what is not a right? Okay, so we're going to play a little game. I'm going to show you something on the screen. And those of you who heard me this morning, you can't play this game. How do they know the answer? They heard. Anyway, so I'm going to show you something on the screen, and you tell me if that's a right or if it's something else, okay? Is this a right?
Yeah.
I should warn you, there are some trick questions here. There are some trick questions here. Yeah, no. This is not a right, folks. This is a gun. What is the right?
bear
To own that gun, to keep and bear that gun. Now let me put this in perspective. You have a right to bear arms, you have the right to gun ownership. You are not entitled to be given a gun. Buy your own gun.
Get your own gun.
Okay? Now, how about this? Freedom of speech, is that a right?
That's right.
Yes, it's a right. Okay, well what about this then? A printing press?
No.
No! Get your own printing press, right? The government can't walk around saying, here's your printer, here's your printer, here's your printer, here's your printing press, right? Why? You have to buy your own printing press. You have to buy your own printer. You have to work. You have to do the job, and then you can buy. So that all this does is it allows you to exercise this. The right is not that. The right is this. So let's look at this list now that you understand. There are still some trick questions in here. So, home ownership, a job, healthcare, food, clothing, education. Are these rights or are these something else?
something else.
Trick question. There is one right in there. Do you see it? Home ownership, exactly. Home ownership is a right. The rest are all something else. Now let me explain what this is. And I want to put this in perspective because I want you to be able to teach this to other people. Don't get confused between rights, which is something that God gives you, and the other thing, which is goods or services. Rights is something God gives you. Goods and services are the product of somebody's labor. You see, if God gives you something, it's a constitutional right. If the right, quote unquote right, depends on somebody else's service, labor, or work, it's what is called a good or a service. It's not a right. Why? For instance, well, FDR, he tried to create a second Bill of Rights. And in that he wanted to include things like healthcare, right to healthcare, right to your own house, the right to a good paying job, the right to adequate food, clothing, and recreation. But if you have your thinking hat on, you will realize that these are nice things, but they violate the very concept of God-given rights, because while you have the right not to be prevented from having an education, you do not have a right to that education. Why? Because that education is dependent on someone doing some work for you. Where do you get that education from that you're promising for free to everybody? Do you capture a bunch of teachers and enslave them and force them to give the education? Yes. No, actually what you do is you capture a bunch of people and you force them all to pay a little for the education. And then both the teachers suffer and the people suffer. My wife is a public school teacher, so you see where this is coming from. Now here's the deal though. You have the right to the fruits of your own labor. You have a right to your own stuff, but not to somebody else's goods. That's stealing. Because if goods are what you're promising to someone, however noble those goods are, like healthcare or a home, where do you get the home from? Who are you going to enslave contractors and make them build homes for everybody? Or do you enslave everybody and take their money to pay for that? You see, the thing is that however noble these goods are, eventually you'll have to enslave some men to guarantee those goods for other men. Our founders were not idiots. They understood quite well that rights were not goods. And you will see in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution that no goods are ever allocated as rights. The only goods you have a right to are the goods, the fruits of your own labor. Notice the difference. The right to bear arms is not the right to a free firearm. The right to free speech is not the right to be given a free printing press or a radio station. The right to the pursuit of happiness is not a guarantee of happiness. This is really critical, and anytime you vote for something, ask yourself, is this guaranteeing goods as rights? Or is this person I'm voting for think it's a good thing to allocate goods as though they're rights? And by the way, the constitutions that have a Bill of Rights for education, jobs, healthcare, homes, and other such goods happen to be communist and socialist constitutions. And you can see how successful they've been, right? They've either gone completely bankrupt, right? Or they're going bankrupt. Somebody says, well, look at Sweden, they're all happy there. Yeah, they have one of the highest suicide rates, and they're going bankrupt. I said, and you can see that in Greece and France and Spain. Here's the deal. Goods that are granted as rights require you to enslave men fiscally, that's financially, or physically, to ensure a continuous supply of the goods you promise to others. But sadly today, most Americans don't know the difference, and they think there's a scale between what is a good and what is a right. Rights are rights and goods are goods. But these are moral issues. Because now you're violating somebody's rights.
That's right.
And the government doesn't get to decide what's a right and what's a good. God does. But now you say, now I'm going to talk about talking to Christians. So bear with me, folks. If you're not a Christian, just bear with me, because I'm going to tell you why this is important towards the end. But when you talk to many Christians, they will say, well, Jesus said we are supposed to take care of the poor. And you Tea Party guys are so mean-spirited, you don't care about the poor. You want them to die. I'll tell you a funny story. So I was speaking at the Tea Party in San Jose, right? And I get out of the Tea Party, and it's me. I'm an Indian, or used to be an Indian. I'm an American. Unhyphenated, mind you. And next to me... Amen. And somebody said, are you an American Indian? I said, no. And then he said, I am an American Indian. I said, oh yeah, Columbus was looking for me and he found you. But here's the deal, right? People think that we're mean-spirited, and they say, well, who's going to take care of the poor? And they said, Jesus said take care of the poor, Jesus fed the poor. A guy came on my Facebook page and he said, Jesus fed the poor and he healed the sick. Jesus was a socialist, right?
Oh my God.
And you're going to get this, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So let me tell you how to answer this thing up to Christians especially, or to anyone. Most of the people who throw this at me aren't really Christians because they're so ultra-liberal that they're just on that far end. But I've got to answer it. They go, well, Jesus was a socialist. Okay, well, let's go over what Jesus taught about giving people. So we go to the story of the Good Samaritan, right? You know the story of the Good Samaritan, right? The Good Samaritan, there's this guy walking down the street to go to Jericho. Some of the thugs beat him up, and they take his money and they leave him for dead. A couple of people walk by, they ignore him. Finally, the Samaritan, who everybody hates, sees him, picks him up, and takes him to the innkeeper, right? And this is how the story goes. He takes him to the innkeeper, and we forget about the innkeeper in this. Usually we're like, oh yeah, that's cool. He goes to the innkeeper and says, Mr. Innkeeper, please take care of this man. And I will come back later on, and when he's well, I will pay half of it now, and when I come back, I want you to pay the other half. He said, okay, when I come back, I will bring some thugs, and they will beat you up until you pay the other half. He says, I will come back, and I will bring an IRS agent with a gun and a badge, and he will say, pay up, and we're going to use that money for this poor, sick man. Is that what happened? No. What did Jesus say? He says, that a Good Samaritan said, I will come back, and I will pay the rest of it. You see, Jesus said, you give to the poor, not force your neighbor to!
Yeah.
You see, loving my neighbor is taking care of him. But loving my other neighbor is not making him pay for my neighbor that needs taken care of. You see, Jesus said, you give to the poor. Jesus was saying it's not the state's job to take care of the poor. It's the church's job to take care of the poor, or the synagogue's job to pay for the poor. Right? And the Old Testament is full of taking care of the poor, but not the state taking care of the poor. It was the people taking care of the poor.
Right.
Now here's the other thing. When the state takes care of the poor, they allocate goods as rights, and they violate the rights of the people who produce those goods to begin with. True rights that came from God. So we see from this, and by the way, Christians have done this really well. For the last 2,000 years, Christians have taken care of the poor. Florence Nightingale pioneered nursing, believing that God had called her to take care of the sick. It was the Christians who created many of the first clinics all over the world as missionary doctors. I grew up in Africa, right? And there were Christian missionary doctors there, and there was the state doctors. Which do you think was a cleaner hospital? Right? Which was a nicer, friendlier group of people? Which one did I want to go to? The missionary hospital, right? Now, I'll tell you a story. I was on a talk show host about 3-4 years ago. It was 2011. A really liberal talk show host in Washington, D.C. He invited me on. I rarely go on talk shows with liberal hosts because it can be, But the guy who booked me said, hey, you know what? He's a really nice guy. He'll give you the last word. I said, okay, fine. So I go on, and it's really fascinating because I get all these liberals calling. All these liberal callers are calling me and beating up on me. And it was good because he let me have the last word. And he was really respectful. After the first 20 minutes, I was only supposed to be on for 20 minutes. He says, can you stay another 20 minutes? Because a lot of liberals want to beat you up, right? So I thought I was holding my own. We'll see, right? So and then I ended up staying for all 3 hours of his show. Right? And what was funny is the last hour, last half of his show, the conservatives must have had a phone call. Hey, there's a conservative on this guy's show. You should go listen to it. And so conservatives started calling up. And they started beating up on him. So I was like, yeah. I had to save him a couple of times, you know. But halfway through the beat up on Neil part, this lady calls up and I talked about living in Africa and how goods and rights and how the church and we should take care of the poor. And so she goes, you're a crazy person. You're mean-spirited. You don't care about the poor. You think your church can take care of the poor? I said, maybe. And she said, maybe in Africa they can do that where they don't have the highest tech equipment. But this is America. This is 2011. Well, last week I was over at my hospital and they have the latest MRI equipment, the latest CAT scan equipment. Hey, you think your church can afford that? I said, ma'am. He goes, what? Can I ask you one question? He goes, what? I said, what is the name of your hospital? Long silence. I go, ma'am, can you tell us the name of your hospital? The host starts cracking up because he knows exactly where this is going, just like you do. Finally, long silence, she goes, St. Jude. But that's not important. I said, ma'am, we have the greatest technology. In that hospital, there's a board that gives fundraising from people, and I said, and it's started by a Christian organization. It's probably, keeps going by the Christian organization. I said, these are Catholic charities. You've heard of Catholic charities. They're all over the world. I said, hey, ma'am, we are in the most state-of-the-art technology. The reason why hospital care and healthcare costs so much is because the government is paying for some of it. Right. And as Ronald Reagan says, if you want sand to be expensive, have the government give it away for free. Why? Because what will happen is some crony capitalist will get in the business and says, well, you can't give away average sand. You have to have quality sand. You have to go through 3 different checks, and we have to have the union guys take care of it. We have to do this, right? And of course we have to check this. And by the way, only these 4 companies should be allowed to deliver the sand.
Regulation.
If a Christian or a charity organization that you trust is not being responsible with your donations, you can stop giving.
That's right.
If a government is not responsible for your donations, you can stop giving, and we'll be collecting donations for your wife while you're in prison. Right? More of a Christian organizations and I want to say charity organizations usually care for the whole person. They want people to recover and grow and to be independent. Most government organizations qualify the amount of funding they get by the amount of people they take care of. So the more people they take care of, the more people in their pool, the higher position that director gets. There is no real incentive for him to get people off because if he helps everybody, he won't have anybody working for him anymore because he won't need them. In fact, it turns out that studies have shown that for every year a child is on welfare, they're mentally retarded by a certain percentage. This is not the case if they're taken care of by a church or a charity. But here's something that most of us don't think about. Whenever the government takes $1 of your hard-earned money for welfare or health care or food or shelter, only 15% of it gets to the poor. So for every $1 you give the government, only 15 cents gets to the poor. The rest of it goes for what? Buildings, unions, pension plans, payments, right? Corruption, building their little fiefdom. I'm not saying there aren't good, dependable, low-paid social workers in government, but if you look at the upper administration classes, they're paid really well. And most of that money goes to them. But in case if you give up money to a Christian charity or a charity that you have looked into, usually 85 cents goes to the poor person, with 15 cents going for the administration and fundraising. Let me give you an example. This is a flyer I got from City Team. City Team is an organization in San Jose, right? And the City Team says, it costs the city between $40,000 and $60,000 to care for a homeless person. It costs City Team $12,000. $12,000. And I actually used this slide in the presentation. The director of City Team heard it. He says, oh, we have to have lunch, we haven't had lunch. He says, there's one thing that's not on the slide. When we spend that $12,000, that homeless person is off the street. When the city spends the $60,000, that homeless person is still on the street, and they're going to spend that $60,000 again next year.
Yeah.
So it's actually unloving to let the government continue to be in the business of charity when we could help 2 to 5 times the number of needy people with the same amount of money. So So this is when when people say, oh, the government, you Tea Party people are loving. No, we are more loving because we think we can get 6 times the efficiency out of it. Now we all agree that this can't happen overnight, right? Because if it happens overnight, people will be dying in the streets. Right? You can't stop welfare tomorrow. You can't stop public education tomorrow. The church must take back its leadership and resume its proper role. By the way, this wouldn't work if the government was giving money to charities. Because then we get back to this problem with the hospitals, right? No, the money has to come from people. Now you say, well, we can't replace the government. Well, we can. Here's why we can. The government actually spends $1.2 trillion every year on welfare and health care for the poor. Okay, $1.2 trillion. You go, wow, that's a lot of money. How are we going to pay that? How is the church or the synagogue going to pay that? Well, first of all, here's what you should know. Last year, America gave about $300 billion to charity. $300 billion. Now, that is 9 times more than the next closest was the Germans, and 11 times more than the next closest was the Italians. Now, if we are 5 to 6 times more efficient than the government, we could take that $1.2 trillion, and guess what it would be in real charity dollars? It would be about $300 billion. It actually be less, $208 billion. We just have to double our giving, and they can cut 50% of our taxes, if you think about it. Because 50%, that 1.2 trillion is about 50% of our taxes. Now here's the deal though. How do we get there? Well, the way we get there, last year I traveled the state of Texas with wonderful governor, not Texas, the state of Kansas, with a wonderful governor, Sam Brownback. And I would give my talk similar to this, and he would give another talk. And I was suggesting to every legislator who heard me, I said, why don't you think about giving 2 times a deduction? If anybody gives $1 to charity, they get 2 times the deduction from their taxes. The state's going to save 6 times that money in expenses. So why not give the person 2 times and you'll incentivize them? So let's hope that catches on. We'll see where it goes. Americans are the most giving people in the world. They give more what they have to an entire group of nations. So, to take care of the poor, there are 2 things we have to do, right? The first one is charity must come from a church or synagogue and individuals, not from the state. But there's a second aspect that's absolutely necessary. Let me show you a picture. Do you know what that looks like? Do you know what that is?
Korea.
Yes. Do you know what country that is? Let me zoom out here. The country you're looking at is right there. Let's zoom back in. That is North Korea. You see the difference? North Korea, South Korea. Okay, let's zoom in a bit more, and there you go. The second key aspect to reduce poverty is freedom. Freedom of speech, freedom to do commerce, freedom of religion, freedom of government intervention. If I'm right about freedom, then shouldn't we see it in the GDP of nations that are free? Will a nation that is more free be more economically strong and have less poverty than a nation that's not free? Right? Here's a chart showing the GDP of the world since Jesus, right? So here's China, here's India, here's Japan, and there's the United States. I want you to look very carefully, right? Where that chart is, this shows that in 1776, the U.S. accounted for only 1% of the total world gross domestic product, while France, oops, let me go back. Well, France, right there, so right here, right? U.S. is 1%, France is 4%. And notice something, the U.S. starts growing amazingly, just in those years, just takes off. Well, France, look at France. Oh yeah, socialist France, 4%. Now here's the other thing, here's another chart showing the GDP per person until the 1800s. Notice the U.S. is starting in the late 1700s with about $650 per person, right? There's the U.S. And then right about here it starts to take off until it reaches, it's right, still less than Western Europe, right? Western Europe's about 1200. There's the U.S. right there. Now let's see what happens in the next century. Okay? 1800, man, just takes off and it keeps growing all the way to what? About the 1950s, 1960s. By 1950, we've outpaced every nation in growth. You say, well, that's because America has all these resources, all these natural resources. No! Africa has more. Africa Africa, where I was born, has more natural resources than any continent. Minerals, oil, everything, right? China and Russia have greater resources than the US. And notice, by the way, there's another group that's fast growing here besides Europe. It's called Japan. After what? After the 40s, after the war. We're talking about our vets, right? What did they do? They liberated Japan. We conquered them, but we liberated them, and we gave them freedom. And Japan doesn't have many resources. But to destroy the resources concept further, let's look at this. Here's a chart from 1969 to 2010. I want you to look at Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a tiny island. I want you to compare it to Cuba. Cuba is 100 times bigger than the island of Hong Kong. Okay? Now, there's Hong Kong, right?
Yeah.
And look how fast it's growing. Their GDP is 29 per person who lives in that tiny place. Why did Hong Kong do so well? Simply because the British left them alone. But they kept a very good court and justice system to protect people's rights. The British said, you know what, we're going to keep a good court system, a good justice system, we're going to protect your rights, but we're going to leave your economy alone. By the way, remember what the role of government is, right? By the way, is it better to be poor in laissez-faire Hong Kong or in socialist France? It turns out that you'd rather be a poor person in France than a poor person in Hong Kong than a poor person in France. Because a poor person in Hong Kong actually does better than a poor person in socialist France. What's the goal of sole government? The sole role of government is what? Is to protect and secure your rights. Sole role of government is to secure those rights, which means enforcing contracts, protecting property, and protecting intellectual rights. And by the way, what about a managed economy? Right back to North Korea. There's a very well-managed economy. Central government manages everything. Okay, that's not a fair comparison. Let's do a comparison and go back to the managed economy of France. Right? Government-controlled economies don't work because governments are not experts in the economy. You think government knows better than you to sell your products? You know, you think governments know what you should sell, how much you should sell? Nobody can be an expert in everything, especially not the government. But the best thing to do for the government is to get out of the business.
That's right.
In fact, even subsidizing. You know, I mean, you may be in the solar panel business. I don't want to mean to insult you, but here's the deal. The government should stay out of solar panel subsidies. Why? Because there might be a better technology out there that is better than solar panels. I'm not saying there is, but maybe there is. But we won't know that because now when the government subsidizes solar panels, guess what? First of all, the government says, solar panels, we're going to put $3,000 for every solar panel. Guess what the price of solar panels just happened? They went up by $3,000. Why? Because if the fair market value was $6,000 and the government says, I'm going to put $3,000, they'll say, well, everybody's still going to spend that $6,000, so now we're going to charge $9,000 and we'll get that $3,000. That's the first thing. The second thing is, guess what? More people get into that market. But maybe there was a better technology, like hydro fuel cells or something. I'm not saying that isn't, but what if that was a better technology? Then all those people who would be employed doing that, instead going to the solar cell business. Governments don't know what's to do good. And I always ask my socialist friends. Okay, it's poverty. Wait, did I miss the slide? Yeah, I think I missed the slide in here. But I always ask my socialist friends. I say, who are these angels in government that are not only geniuses in the economy, but they're most selfless people that you've ever heard of, that they will never manipulate the economy for their own personal gain? Who are the people who would never take money from the Saudis for uranium? Or by the way, poverty will not be reduced by charity. It will be helped by charity. It will not be reduced by government welfare. It will be not reduced by education. Because look at the poverty levels in America for the last 3 decades. No change. It's pretty much the same. Even liberals are now learning this. Bono, who has been flying around the world trying to get millionaires to put more money into poverty-stricken areas, realized after reading this book by George Atiyeh, called Africa Unchained, he said capitalism takes out more people out of poverty than aid.
Oh, really?
You see, once we have freedom, poverty can only be reduced through commerce. And that's the message of the Tea Party, isn't it?
Yep, free markets.
Free markets. And that's the message we want to tell our socialist friends. That this is how things are supposed to be. So, I'm going to wrap up here. How can we win in 2016? And this is why I started talking about Christians. And we can do a Q&A afterwards. Here's how you win in 2016. Remember in 2012, Mitt Romney ran ads on TV. And he spent, I think they calculated, he spent $1,000 a vote. Or something like that. It was insane, right? Yet he lost by 2 million votes, 2 to 3 million votes. Now I admit, 1 million of those votes were from Mickey Mouse, so we understand that. In 2008, McCain loses by 9 million votes. But in each case, they spend thousands of dollars, millions of dollars, maybe $1 billion in their budget, right? Trying to convince people in the middle to vote for conservative values. Not that McCain or Romney are very conservative, but that's okay. They're more conservative than Obama, right? So, oh, I said that word. I'm supposed to wash my mouth. But how hard is it to turn somebody who's a liberal or a center to vote for conservative values if they don't believe in conservative values? Wouldn't it be easier to convert somebody who doesn't vote, but is conservative, to vote? And that's the way we need to win. There are over 60 million. This is why I think this is important to all Tea Partiers, right? It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not. This is how you can win. This is the easiest way for you to win. There are over 60 million evangelical Christians of voting age in America. This is not counting even the Catholic. Just evangelical. I'm just saying one demographic. Because they're one of the biggest ones. Yet in every election, right? In most elections, we're losing them by 10 million votes, 9 million votes, 2 million votes. Most elections, only 20 million of those evangelicals vote. That means over 40 million of them do not vote. Now let me assure you, it's a lot easier to get an evangelical who is conservative to vote than it is to get a flaming real liberal to vote for your cause. I don't care how much money you spend on that flaming liberal, they'll look at your ad and they'll say, what? I'm not going to vote for him. And they'll listen to some lie or some whatever this, they say, I'm not going to vote for him. Right? They're mean-spirited, they're hateful. But you go to a conservative who doesn't vote and you say, I want to convince you to vote. And that means if you're in a Christian church, that means a quarter of them, a third of them don't vote, right? Or 2/3 of them don't vote, rather. That means if you're sitting here, the next two people next to you don't vote. So even if you're a Jewish person here, or even any other religion, but you're a conservative, this is your prime target. This is how you need to win. This is how you should win. And how do we get there? That's why I came up with this book called 40 Days Towards a More Godly Nation. Right? Now, the book is basically a study guide, and I totally forgot what you told me to announce tonight.
Well, I have little cards that tell about the study.
Okay.
We recommend that you try to get this in your church. It's a 6-part study. And we have a DVD of Neil presenting it. It's not made for sale yet, but we can set your church up. With Neil teaching this class. And this lights a fire in those conservatives that
Don't vote.
yeah.
They're just on the edge. They rarely vote, they just don't vote. And it does it in a very, just the information I gave you. Where it just says, look, this is the information. Rights and goods. Look how much good the Christians have done over the years. You need to vote. And by the way, and when we can, in the Q&A, we'll answer, I'll tell you, if somebody asked me the question why I wrote the first book called Jesus is Involved in Politics, I'll tell you. But here's the other thing. It's because Christians got involved in politics that many years ago, a Scandinavian king said it was a bad idea to be able to kidnap your bride and force her to marry you. That's a nice law to pass. You should law ban it. But it's also the reason why slavery was banned. It's also the reason why killing twins in Africa was banned, because they thought twins were they thought it was a bad luck omen, and they would kill both the twins. So Christians came on the scene, they said, you know what, that's not going to happen anymore, and they got involved in politics, they changed it. In fact, there are over 100, the book lists about 25 of them, but there are hundreds of laws. You know, in India, sati, they used to throw Hindu women into their husband's funeral pyre. Right? Abandonment of infants, abandonment of elderly, temple prostitution, child prostitution, gladiatorial combat. Even we were there, you know, before PETA came on the scene, we had a what? Christians were the first ones to say that animals should not be treated cruelly. Then PETA came on the scene and they went crazy. And it's the same thing, actually, we have a farming community here. It's the same thing with the child labor laws. The original child labor laws just said that you couldn't put these kids and make them to be chimney sweeps. They was run by Christian, changed that law. Now it's like your own son can't work on your farm.
Yeah.
You know, see what happens? The liberals get hold of it, and whoa! I want to wrap up here. In Oregon, recently a baker was fined, put out of business, because she refused to bake a cake for a same-sex couple. In Phoenix, a photographer was fined for the same thing. If the Supreme Court decides that same-sex marriage is a civil right, there are a lot of ramifications that could happen. The worst thing that could happen is that now it's hate speech to say same-sex marriage is wrong. The CEO of Mozilla was kicked out of his company because he donated money to Prop 8. Imagine now if your church preaches out of Leviticus, you are now going to a hate church. And you could lose your job because somebody says, we don't want anybody hired from that hateful speech, hateful church.
What about general right?
Oh, yeah, well, it's not hate speech. It's not hate speech if you're liberal.
That's right. Oh, I see. Thank you. I was confused.
Yeah. Don't you know? Folks, it took me 12 long years to earn the right to become a U.S. citizen. I lived as an engineer. I lived in many countries, as you know, and as an engineer, I traveled in many countries. I've traveled all over the world as an engineer, teaching people and stuff like that. Let me tell you, folks, this is the greatest nation on earth. There's no place like this. I always would come back here and say, this is the greatest place on earth. But here's the danger of it. If we lose this battle, history will record, as Reagan says, with the greatest astonishment, that those with the most to lose did the least to prevent its happening.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I fear that one day, if we don't take action now, and take back our nation now, take back our state now. I mean, with 40 million evangelicals not voting, we could win California back. Because you're telling me that we lose the elections in California by 1 million votes. You're telling me there are not 1 million Christians sitting in the pews today or on Sunday that didn't vote? There are. Find them. There are only 15% of them. If we can get 15% of the Christians who aren't voting to vote, we would change this over. So even it doesn't matter where you're coming on that scale. If you're a secular person, I have atheist friends who are like, yeah, this is a good thing because they're conservatives.
I have a question, because I've been in the church,
Okay.
and I've tried to say a little bit about politics.
Oh, yes.
okay?
Oh, yes.
And they, oh no, we can't talk about politics,
Yes.
because they'll take our taxing away from
Okay.
us.
So here-
So they've got them all fearful,
Yes.
our preachers.
So back in the 50s, LBJ passed a law that says if you're a nonprofit, you will lose your nonprofit status if you talk about politics. It wasn't meant for churches, but churches didn't do anything about it. And guess what? Now they're afraid of that. But here's the deal. No church has ever lost its funding because of that.
That's right.
And in fact, there's a Pulpit Freedom Day they have where thousands of churches preach politics from the pulpit, and they mail their sermons to the IRS and say, come sue me! And the IRS is afraid to do so because they know the very first case will hit the freedom of speech, the First Amendment, and it will go out the door. The IRS would rather you be scared about it without ever exposing it. The unknown is scared. So what we really need is we need to find somebody in the IRS who will actually sue a church. You know any Christians in the IRS say, hey, can you get them to sue a church? Because this will be the way we will win. But this is the reality. And that's what you have to deal with. And that's why actually this study is great, because you can start a study in your home without your pastor having to approve it. And I always say, infiltrate your church. Move up the ranks, become the deacons and the elders. Right? Infiltrate your church. Yeah. Be the mole. Take this book and start small groups and replicate yourself until the pastor is the pastor, and he's the only one that says no politics in church, and he's got 800 people going like politics. But the reality is, in the book, I don't talk about politics. I talk about God's laws and man's laws. And this works in the synagogue, because most of God's laws are what? From the Old Testament, too. Right? So in the book, we talk about how God's laws align. In fact, the reality is, if God gave us those laws, why did God give us those laws? So that we wouldn't have fun? No, it's the same reason that we have traffic laws. So we don't kill ourselves. And if we violate the traffic laws, somebody will get hurt at some point. If we violate God's laws, people will get hurt. And in the book I talk about how all these different laws have caused so much damage. The statistics are right there. But here's the deal, folks. I fear that one day in the near future, like my father told me, son, you have to give up your dreams and we have to leave this country, because it's illegal to give someone a Bible in Yemen. Instead, I'll be saying to my daughter, honey, we have to leave this country and our dreams are shattered because it's legal to give somebody a Bible in the United States of America. But folks, remember this. I escaped to come here. But if we lose freedom here, there is no place to run to. This is the last time on earth. Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Neil. Great job. I think that was fantastic. Neil sounds like a guy we could have come back in the future as well. Because it's actually been, even for our Tea Party group, I think it's been over a year where we really focused on our rights and some of these things that you reminded us of tonight. So, there's so much stuff going on. You'd think that we would talk about the Constitution all the time and our rights, but with so much going on, it's nice to get that refreshing message. So, Neil, you have some books in the back.